More than 30 years after Liar's Poker was published, it is still the book to read if you really want to understand what drives Wall Street. Michael Lewis's 1989 bestseller told the story of his experience as a bond salesman in the 80s. It was a time of excess and greed, roller coaster markets, and fabulous wealth and scandals, all captured in newspaper headlines at the time. Now Lewis is revisiting Liar's Poker with a newly recorded audiobook and a companion podcast called Other People's Money. Lewis visited the old Federal Reserve Bank building in San Francisco to reflect on the book that changed his life.
I wrote my first book more than 3 decades ago. It was part memoir and part reportage. Liar's Poker, it was called. The book hit some kind of nerve in our culture.
Michael Lewis let us in on the way Wall Street really works with Liar's Poker.
I mean, I didn't even really know the culture had nerves. I'd never done this before. I had no idea what to expect. The book shot right to the top of every bestseller list and stayed on them for a year. And right away, I noticed something odd. I thought I'd written a book that put Wall Street in its place.
The place has become, in the last 10 years, a fantastic casino.
I thought that like any 20-year-old who was contemplating a career on Wall Street might read my book and decide to go do something more deeply enriching. But that's not what happened. In the first few months, I had maybe 1,000 letters from people, mainly young men, saying, "I love your book, dude. I'm now totally stoked to go work on Wall Street. You got any more tips on how I can get in?" What I thought of as a cautionary tale became an instruction manual. That's when I learned that writers simply write books. Readers decide what the words mean. At the time, I thought that Liar's Poker marked the end of a special period of financial madness.
There is something rotten in the state of Wall Street.
There were 184 bank failures
major
last
charges alleging the widespread illegal use of insider information.
His firm, Solomon Brothers, stands accused of illegal trading in government bonds.
I was a 25-year-old art history major who knew very little about money, and yet grown-ups were paying me hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to move huge piles of money around. I thought I was simply documenting the end of an era of absolute madness on Wall Street, but it turns out this era was just the beginning of something bigger, of Wall Street grabbing an ever larger share of the US economy, of the people on Wall Street living by one set of rules, and most everyone else living by another. I moved on after I wrote the book. I mean, I never even read it again. But I've written a couple of more books about Wall Street, and I know that the world described in Liar's Poker has changed. Wall Street used to be full of telephones with cords on them, and shouting, and big hairy men. It was crude and rude and socially unacceptable. Wall Street's now gone quiet. Its most important sound is the hum of a stack of computer servers. The people take a lot more care not to draw attention to themselves. I think that's the main reason that people still read my book, why, say, interns on Wall Street are assigned it as homework, because I'd gotten the last glimpse of the great beast before it ducked back inside its cave. And I accidentally wrote something that endured. Just recently, I found out that the audiobook rights to Liar's Poker had reverted back to me. So I decided to reopen Liar's Poker and record it again, the whole thing.
Ready?
It was a truly weird experience, almost like meeting a different me. It was actually difficult to read the book again, but it reminded me of the value of not always just moving forward, of taking the time to stop and go back. I'd thrown everything about Liar's Poker into a couple of bankers' boxes and left them sealed up in a storage unit for decades. After we recorded the audiobook, I pulled those boxes out and looked inside. There was a whole other me in there. A guy who, for a long time, couldn't even see a decent book title staring him right in the face. But also a guy who knew he had a good story in front of him. And I had to admire his strange decision to leave a huge pile of money behind to write a book that he thought could change the world, even if it didn't change the world in the ways he expected.
The Liar's Poker audiobook and companion podcast, Other People's Money, are out now.
Yeah, look at Michael Lewis back in the day. I like what he said. He thought it would be a cautionary tale instead it was an instruction manual.
That's right.
Readers decide what it means.
We'll be right back.